Hello and welcome to ETAuto. I'm Nabeel A Khan. We often get stuck in traffic jam and think if we can touch our destination in the air. That's what being realized by a new startup called Blade India. You can call it an air taxi or air mobility startup. And I'm joined by the co-founder and managing director of Blade India, Amit Dutta. Amit, thank you so much for joining in ETAuto conversation. Can you give us a sense how did the idea of Blade India come? Actually, this is a US-based startup. Probably you have set up a joint venture. India is seen as a country where value for money proposition is very important. But we see the millionaires, the business class is also expanding very rapidly. So how did the idea come and how does it look for you? It's been 3 years into the business, the air taxi or air mobility for short duration. I think you are the only company that is going to provide a short duration like within city air movement or a neighboring satellite city, air movement. That's a fantastic idea for many. We have seen how we get stuck in traffic for hours and hours that you're trying to solve this. But how many, you think of the population will be able to utilize such services in countries like India?
Okay. So, Nabil, first, thank you for inviting me. And as you said, where the idea came, I was in fact taking a Uber from Manhattan to the airport and doing the typical 2 hour drive. And I saw a Blade helicopter flying above. And I thought, what if I could do this journey, right? And reminded me of what happens back home, right? And that's how the journey started, right? We partnered Hunch Ventures, which is a family fund with interest in lifestyle businesses and infrastructure. And we partnered with Blade US in getting brand Blade into the country. Blade, as you know, has been the global leader in short haul mobility. And for us, the obvious choice of starting with a first market was Bombay, Pune, and Shirdi. No surprise, India is actually one of the most congested markets globally. I'll just share a statistic with you, and is last 10 years, our road network has increased by 33%, but car registrations have grown by 300%. In India, our market penetration is said to be very low, 22 cars per thousand. The US has 950 cars per thousand. Simply put, there is no further place to expand. If the way that the Indian economy is expanding, unless we look at air mobility, which is happening in other countries, right, as a medium of mass transit, and there is going to be a drag on India's development. And this is happening not just in India, it's happening in the US, it's happening in Europe. Because of other developments in this field, Nabil, you see with the rise of electric vehicles, which are going to be much less costly, zero carbon footprint, right, is also changing the entire part of carbon emissions. So this is a disruption, right, which time is starting to happen. And as I said, you've seen many disruptions in India. You've seen Netflix disrupting the media business, payments with companies like Geo, right? Amazon. I think the next big disruption is actually going to be in the area of urban air mobility. And to your point, it is helicopters today are an expensive asset, but that's changing, right? What we are offering is buy the seat helicopter service, which means you don't charter the entire helicopter. In a Bombay to a Pune, even if you've got one passenger, we fly, right? And what's the cost? 14,000 rupees. So it brings it within the affordable range for a large base of customers, right? But as we move forward and with economies of scale, we would be able to offer significantly more affordable fares, even with helicopters. As an example, we are now planning to get into the Bangalore airport to electronic city route. It's at least 3.5 hours, right? And we could do that maybe in 15 minutes. And our pricing would be in the range of maybe 4,000 rupees or so, right? Broadly in that ballpark, right? Is that so? It makes it actually affordable to a fairly large base of customers.
So if I put it in a simpler term, in Indian context, we had a shared auto taking you from in terms of last mile connectivity or to the destination. Similarly, you are providing a shared air mobility for urban, people. That's what I understand, because of the that will help them cut the congestion part. But in terms of frequency, how frequent these services shall be made available? How often we can connect with these kind of air taxi services or urban air mobility?
Okay, so you're absolutely correct. This is about what you call ride sharing. The only difference is what we are offering is a very, very quality experience from end to end. As an example, in Pune, you don't have to go to Pune airport to take a flight. Our helipads are in the heart of Pune. And where do we bring you? Not to the airport, but to Mahalakshmi Racecourse, right? In the heart of South Mumbai. We have lounges at our takeoff and landing stations, which actually create a very premium environment. So, what we are attempting to provide is actually an end to end experience with a huge focus on also safety protocol, because, especially in today's environment, there is a marked change towards customers looking at what's our safety and procedures, sanitization procedures, and we are very, very particular about ensuring that we live up to those expectations, right? As to our frequency you mentioned, our attempt is, as we are doing a buy the seat, we will have high frequency based on whatever is consumer demand, right? So obviously we'll tailor our frequency based on those time slots where we expect to see consumer demand.
What
As
is
an
your current fleet size?
So currently we are an asset light model, which means that we sign up with operators, right, for whom we inspect, certify their flight. In fact, we've got a retired air marshal who is the head of our safety committee, and along with a US counterpart, they vet the fleet. We work with operators, right, and we then certify the craft we are going to use, which is available to us thereafter. We've currently done our first market launch in Maharashtra, right, where we used 2 or 3 aircraft, right? And unfortunately, there have been 2 rounds of COVID in between. So even though we started in December 19, but we've been disrupted twice over, and
But
now.
there has been advantage for air mobility, if I'm not wrong, during the COVID time.
So
I think a lot of people took flights to reach to another destination for to seek medical help. And in that scenario, we saw people like you getting huge business opportunity in international or interstate travel also,
so there's
or
been,
intercity also.
Nabeel, you are absolutely right. There has been a marked change in the attitude towards air mobility. One, as you said, is that yes, because of people wanting to do air evacuation, medical supplies, and Blade US has been at the forefront of this. There has been a huge change, and that's going to be an important line of business for us in the future, right? Which is air ambulance, organ transfers, whenever that is allowed, because we've seen the need for doing that. Huge amount of requests, charter inquiries. Even when families wanting to go to a Shirdi or go anywhere, families wanting to charter the entire craft so that nobody else uses it. There has been a threefold growth in charter inquiries, right? Not just within India, people wanting to use even a fixed wing craft for going out of the country. And I think the entire mindset towards traveling by air and by helicopters has gone through a lot of change. Right? So that's one. The other, I think the attitude towards safety and hygiene protocols, that, when I'm going through a Blade heliport, I know there are not too many people, there's a safety procedures, it's not a crowded airport. So you're spot on. There has been that marked change.
Amit, I
And
just want to understand what is your business breakup? Sorry to interject.
sorry.
Between chartered, overseas flight, interstate or intercity flights and within city flights in terms of demand, in terms of the business that you are doing in India and globally? How do you see?
Okay. So the essence of Blade's business is we are all about point to point short haul business. And we've been making use of helicopters, right, to do short haul because we are not using airports, right? So that's our business. In between, we've had about maybe 20% of our business being charters of helicopters. So, we talked about people who today said, I don't have to live in a Mumbai. I could live in an Ambi Valley and the weekends I come here to Mumbai, right? So people chartering a flight, right, to go back to where they stay. So you've had about 20% of that business coming in charters. We've not been able to fully service the demand on charters, right? But our essential model in Blade is the by the seat service, as you talked about. We've just started the work on the air ambulance, and that's going to be a major step forward as we move ahead. As I said, Nabil, what we've really done is our first launch market in Maharashtra. And what we are now doing, we have prepared the groundwork on expanding this network, working with a lot of state governments in expanding in their states. So a number of state governments have been talking to us and saying, how can we help heli-tourism in their markets? Like, the Karnataka government. And we are closely partnering with them in ensuring how can we introduce services for the state.
If we talk about the business opportunities, what are the opportunities you see? One is individuals, other one, institutional, or is there any other business avenue that you see in this?
Let me first break it up into the products. We see the businesses, what I first call is short haul by the seat, airport to city center, and maybe places like a Bombay, Pune, which are typically within 35 to 40 minutes. It could also be tomorrow, an example like in a Pune, we could have maybe 7 landing stations and do 5 or 7 minute flights across the city. So that's the main business. The other businesses along with this is maybe religious tourism, like we're doing a Shirdi, right? It could be a Tirupati. And a lot of these religious places are in far-flung mountainous areas where maybe a 10-hour journey you can do in 30 minutes, right? Along with that, there's leisure tourism. So in Karnataka now, we are working with a lot of hotels to get visitors into Kurg, Kabini, Chikmagalur. So that's the entire leisure tourism. Like in Bihar, the government is interested in doing the entire Buddhist circuit, right? So these really are what I call the by the seat services. The other sector is where we are looking at is the medical services group, the air ambulance. And there we are partnering with an investee company of Hunch Ventures called My Healthcare. And they've got over 20 million patients, right? And we want to work with them in offering air ambulance services to that customer base.
In terms of, we talk about, the business size, what kind of business size do you see over the next few years? Can you give us some guidance on this, and how do you look at the investments to be going in to reach that kind of business? And what is the current fund that you have raised?
So, as I said, is that as you look into the future, Naveen, is we've currently looked at what's available today, which is all about using helicopters. But just like I said, is that there is a more disruption taking place. Just like India moved from a 2G to a 5G, the wave of electric, which you see in cars like Tesla or two-wheelers, there is over $5 billion has been invested in development of electric vertical craft. Our partner, Blade US, is working with a lot of EVAs, right, electric vertical operators, in developing the craft. Right? So we do see, and there is enough news that the flying taxis, electric craft, will be there maybe 3 years from now. So the sort of the business that we see in 5 years from now, of course, it will need a lot of support working with the regulatory agencies, the town planning agencies, right? But very clearly, that it becomes a very, very large business. So what Blade India aspires to do is we potentially see that from a top line revenue, we could be at least $1 billion of top line revenue another 5 years from now.
Okay, very good. What kind of investment you have already pushed in, and how do you see? Do you want to go for another round of funding? How does the expansion look like?
Definitely, while I cannot, I cannot diverge all the facts, but I would say this is our joint venture partner, Blade, a few months back listed in Nasdaq in the US, and they raised over $370 million at a valuation of $1 billion. This, what we are planning to set up, is not just a craft going from A to B. It is the entire ecosystem of vertiports that we have, the entire experience, right? This calls for significant investment. It's a large ecosystem. We'll need investment. So at that point when we do come to our funding, and I will keep you all informed. But just give an example as to what our joint venture partner has done in the US, been very successful in raising those $370 million for the expansion.
What kind of challenges you face on the way forward, if you could share with us, and how are you going to tackle them?
So one is, you see, this is not incremental change. This is more about disruptive change. It's just like, so a large part of that, Nabeel, is going to be about consumer adoption. When you talk about helicopters, and I said that, the fact that people will start using them as habit. What we do want people to do, and this is an example we've seen in Pune, we've got close to a 65% repeat flying rate, which means Nabil, who would earlier take his car and come from Pune to Bombay twice a week, now said, I stopped using the car. I actually am going to use a helicopter. So this led us to introduce an innovation of a coupon booklet, 30 tickets. They said, I'll use it during the month. So for us, the challenge is the consumer adoption, that I don't use you once, but I make it a habit. The initial pilot has shown that habit can form fairly quickly. And I think instances like COVID actually help people say, I don't want to be in a closed car compartment. I'd rather be there in the helicopter. So I still remain that consumer adoption is one. As we move forward, right, second is going to be working with the regulatory authorities. And we've recently set up with Confederation of Indian Industry a task force on urban air mobility, where Blade India is chairing that. And we are working with a number of players in the ecosystem and presenting to the government on what needs to be done to develop our city as smart cities, develop a system of vertiports, right? How do we amend some of the regulatory policies, keeping in line what's happening in the more developed markets like the US and Europe, right? I think that's going to be one of the big to-dos in ensuring that our regulatory policies support the fast growth of urban air mobility.
Which are the sector you are operating right now, main sectors?
So we have currently operated one sector for by the seat. We've done charters across the country. By the seat has been the sector where we've experimented, which is Pune, Mumbai, Shirdi. We've also added Shillem and Ambi Valley during the COVID months because we had a lot of requests for getting customers who were going to Shillem and going to Ambi Valley. We are now expanding to Karnataka, where we will be doing the airport routes from the city center and the nearby tourist places. Post that, we are looking at a fairly fast expansion across the country. So we've spent about 2 years in mapping out the entire country. What is a convenient landing place, takeoff point, what's convenient. So that's taken a lot of time and effort for us to complete that entire exercise.
How easy it is to get a helipad? Because, if people have to commute, because you cannot have multiple helipads. Anyway, people have to come on road to reach even the helipad to take your flights. So how are you going to resolve that issue?
So that's a good point, is that, you see, it's unlike an airport, which takes maybe 10 years to build. There's a gestation time for an airport. Our helipad in Pune, right, is in the heart of the city, right? So for a visitor in Koramangala, it may take 5 to 7 minutes to reach your helipad. Now, land is the construction time doesn't take time, but yes, then it takes a couple of weeks in working with the regulatory authorities to ensure that we follow the protocol for craft which is landing at any point of time. You see, under the current protocol, if you are landing less than 7 times in a month, you don't even need permission, like what happens during elections, right? But as we make it a regular landing station, there are processes, and we are very careful about observing them. But to your point, it's not a long gestation period, right? We've set up our own helipad in Shirdi, and we've done all of this in fairly quick time.
So all you want to set up by yourself, you own the real estate, or how you're
Well,
going?
well, there can be two models. There could be, we could make use of helipads which are there in any case, and we make use of those helipads. Like as we look in Karnataka, we've been offered Jaipur, where the helipad is available. There is existing, places also where helipads are available. So that is the first block.
So you are taking them on lease.
So that the model in which we work, commercials, will be different from point to point. But let's say today there also could be, like we are talking to some of the hotels in Coorg and Kabini, who may also give us space for us to create a small helipad. You need a small area for us to land. You see, that is not a big bottleneck. The biggest bottleneck here, as we said, is getting consumers into the habit of saying, when I land in Bangalore, I don't have to take that taxi ride. I could actually get into the helicopter in 40 minutes. I'm there at my holiday destination.
No, just want to understand your business model in terms of, helipad. Will you own it? Will you lease it? How does it work? Because owning it will be a very costly affair.
What we want to do is that in most cases, they could be helipads, which are more public helipads, where typically people may charge you a landing fee every time you land. Now, it could be something you use exclusively and you pay a leasing amount per month. So it will vary between the two, right? But what we are looking at doing, as you said, is looking at creating helipads, which is convenient for passengers. And that may call for us setting up certain helipads, right? Where the frequency of travel will be very, very high, right? Like we've done. And we could be taking that on a regular leasing basis.
What is the, lowest cost for charter in India? If somebody wants to hire a charter plane from you, how many seats? What would be the lowest cost?
Well,
Yeah.
as I said, is that the cost is a function of what is the demand. As you know, Nabeel, is during election times, and we are not in that business, right? A lot of helicopter operators actually find it very profitable because there's huge demand, right? I think it comes back to what, in the end, a helicopter is an expensive asset, right? Typically, when they're charters for minimum of 2 hours or so, right? It depends on what sort of craft do you want to take, a 4-seater craft, a 6-seater craft, right? On that. But I would say broadly the range for maybe a 2 hour charter journey would be the range of maybe say 1.8 to 2 lakhs. Typically, that's the sort of the amount that you would pay, right? Now, this is the charter business is what a lot of helicopter operators have been doing. I repeat, our business is not charters. Our business is creating an experience where Nabeel says, great, it's a fantastic experience from point to point, right? And that's what we are creating. But by the way, we were a small part of a business where, customers saying, I'd like to charter your craft and go from here to Alibag or go from here to Shilim, and we do that as well. But we are not focused on charters. It's just that COVID provided an opportunity to do charters because by the seat services were not operational.
Thank you, Amit. That's fantastic idea. Hope it does well and it solves a lot of issue of people like us and many who get stuck and try to fly out to their destination. I hope it does well and comes into the habit and it becomes pocket friendly to the people as well. Thank you so much once again for joining ETAuto.
Thank you, Nabeel. Thank you.